My sister destroyed my marriage while I carried her future nephew, thinking I was too vulnerable to fight back. She underestimated the fury of a woman protecting her unborn child. What happened next taught them both that betrayal has consequences they never saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sickness had finally begun to subside as I entered my second trimester, and for the first time in weeks, I felt genuinely excited about the future. Standing in the nursery of our Victorian home in Millbrook Heights, I ran my hand over the soft yellow paint we had chosen together, imagining the life that would soon fill this space. David and I had tried for 3 years to conceive, enduring countless disappointments and medical consultations before finally receiving the news that would change everything. At 28, I was finally going to become the mother I had dreamed of being since childhood. The irony was not lost on me that my pregnancy had brought our families closer together than they had been in years. My younger sister Natalie had moved back to town 6 months earlier after finishing her master's degree in marketing, and she had become an invaluable source of support during the challenging early weeks of my pregnancy. When morning sickness left me bedridden for days at a time, Natalie would arrive with homemade soup and cheerful conversation, helping me maintain the graphic design business I had built from our home office. David, my husband of 4 years, worked long hours as a project manager for a construction firm, often returning home exhausted but always ready to rub my feet or listen to my concerns about becoming a first-time mother. Our relationship had not always been easy, but pregnancy seemed to have brought out the best in both of us. David had transformed their spare bedroom into a home office for me, complete with ergonomic furniture and professional lighting that allowed me to work comfortably even as my body changed. He attended every prenatal appointment, asked thoughtful questions about child development, and had already begun researching the best schools in our district. The man who had once seemed hesitant about the responsibilities of parenthood had become genuinely excited about our growing family. Natalie's presence in our lives had been equally positive. She possessed a natural warmth and energy that made everyone around her feel special, and her marketing expertise had helped me secure several high-paying clients who were expanding my business beyond anything I had achieved independently. She would often join us for dinner, sharing stories about her new position at a downtown advertising agency while helping me plan the practical aspects of preparing for motherhood. Her enthusiasm about becoming an aunt was infectious, and I felt grateful that our child would have such a devoted family member from the beginning. The first indication that something was wrong came on a Tuesday afternoon in October. I was working on a logo design for a local restaurant when I realized I had forgotten my prenatal vitamins at the office downtown, where I had met with a client earlier that day. David was at a construction site 40 minutes away, and I knew he would not be available to retrieve them until evening. The vitamins were important enough that my doctor had stressed taking them at the same time each day, so I decided to drive downtown myself despite feeling tired. The office building where I had met my client was a converted warehouse in the Arts District, and parking was notoriously difficult to find during business hours. After circling the block twice, I finally found a space 3 blocks away and walked back to the building, my hand instinctively protective over my growing belly. The October air was crisp and energizing, and I found myself looking forward to the brief excursion as a break from the isolation of working from home. The elevator to the 3rd floor was crowded with professionals leaving early for the day, and I squeezed into the corner, checking my phone for messages. David had sent a text asking about dinner plans, and Natalie had forwarded a funny article about pregnancy cravings that made me smile despite my fatigue. The normalcy of these interactions would later seem surreal when I considered how completely my world was about to change. The hallway outside my client's office was dimly lit, and I moved quickly toward the conference room, where I remembered leaving my vitamin bottle during our afternoon meeting. The building was older and poorly soundproofed, and I could hear conversations and phone calls from various offices as I walked. Most of the sounds were the typical background noise of a busy professional building, but as I approached the conference room, I heard something that made me stop suddenly. David's laugh was distinctive, a warm sound that had first attracted me to him during college. I had heard it thousands of times over the years we had been together, and I recognized it immediately despite the unexpected context. He was supposed to be at a construction site on the other side of town, supervising the installation of commercial kitchen equipment that would keep him busy until evening. The confusion I felt was immediate and disorienting. I stood in the hallway for several moments, trying to process what I was hearing and determine whether my pregnancy was affecting my perception. The exhaustion and hormonal changes of recent months had occasionally made me feel uncertain about things I would normally trust completely. But David's voice became clearer as I moved closer to the conference room, and there was no mistaking his presence in a place where he had no apparent reason to be. The door to the conference room was slightly ajar, and through the gap I could see part of the table where I had met with my client hours earlier. David was seated with his back toward the door, but his posture was relaxed and intimate, in a way that suggested this was not a business meeting. Someone else was in the room with him, someone whose presence was making him laugh with genuine pleasure and affection. My first instinct was to announce my presence and ask David why he was there, assuming there must be a reasonable explanation for his unexpected appearance. Perhaps his construction project had been delayed or canceled, and he had decided to surprise me by retrieving my vitamins himself. The explanation seemed logical, and I felt foolish for the momentary suspicion that had made my heart race. I pushed the door open wider and stepped into the conference room, prepared to greet my husband with a smile and gratitude for his thoughtfulness. The words of greeting died in my throat as I saw the full scene before me. David was not alone in the room, and he was not there to retrieve my vitamins. He was seated across from Natalie, their hands intertwined on the table between them, their faces close together in a posture of unmistakable intimacy. The shock was so complete that I could not immediately process what I was seeing. My husband and my sister looked like lovers sharing a secret moment, their body language conveying a familiarity that spoke of ongoing intimacy rather than a single moment of poor judgment. Natalie's free hand was resting on David's arm, her thumb moving in small circles that suggested this physical connection was natural and established. Neither of them noticed my presence immediately, and I stood frozen in the doorway, watching them interact with a comfort and affection that belonged in my marriage. David was speaking softly to Natalie, his voice carrying the same tender tone he used with me during our most intimate conversations. Natalie was responding with giggles and whispered comments that made David smile in a way I had not seen in months. The realization that they were having an affair hit me with physical force, and I felt my knees weaken as the implications became clear. This was not a chance encounter or a moment of weakness. The ease of their interaction suggested a relationship that had been developing over time, probably for weeks or months. While I had been celebrating my pregnancy and appreciating their support, they had been conducting a secret relationship that made a mockery of everything I trusted about my life. My movement as I steadied myself against the doorframe finally caught their attention. David looked up first, his expression changing from affection to shock to something that might have been guilt or fear. Natalie turned more slowly, her face cycling through similar emotions before settling into a defiant expression that surprised me with its boldness. The silence that followed was suffocating. I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat and the distant noise of traffic from the street below, but none of us spoke for what felt like an eternity. David's face had gone pale, and his hand had instinctively pulled away from Natalie's, but the gesture felt meaningless given what I had already witnessed. Natalie was the first to speak, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Rebecca, I can explain this." The casualness of her tone shocked me more than anything else that had happened. She spoke as if she had been caught gossiping about a mutual acquaintance, not destroying my marriage while I carried my first child. David stood up slowly, his movements careful and deliberate as if he were trying not to startle a frightened animal. "Becca, please sit down. We need to talk about this." The use of my childhood nickname, which he only employed during our most tender moments, felt like a betrayal in itself. I found my voice, though it sounded foreign to my ears. "How long?" The question was simple, but it carried the weight of everything I needed to understand about the destruction of my marriage and my relationship with my sister. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Natalie and David exchanged a glance that communicated more than words could convey. They had clearly discussed this moment, prepared for the possibility that they would be discovered. The coordination of their response spoke to a level of planning and consideration that made their betrayal feel even more deliberate and cruel. 2 months, David said quietly. It started 2 months ago. 2 months. I was 3 months pregnant, which meant their affair had begun just as my morning sickness was at its worst, when I was most dependent on their support and care. While Natalie had been bringing me soup and helping with my business, she had also been developing an intimate relationship with my husband. While David had been attending prenatal appointments and discussing our future as parents, he had been building a secret life with my sister. The cruelty of the timing was breathtaking. They had chosen to begin their affair during the most vulnerable period of my life, when I was physically and emotionally dependent on their support. They had used my pregnancy as cover for their betrayal, knowing that my condition would make me less likely to suspect their activities and less able to respond effectively if I discovered the truth. I placed my hand on my belly, feeling the slight curve that represented the life growing inside me. This child, who should have been welcomed into a stable and loving family, was now going to be born into the wreckage of a marriage destroyed by the two people I had trusted most. The betrayal was not just personal but had implications for an innocent life who deserved better from the adults responsible for their well-being. The rage that began building in that moment was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It started as a burning sensation in my chest and spread throughout my body, fueled by the recognition that their betrayal had not only destroyed my marriage, but had potentially damaged my child's future. The protective instincts that had been growing stronger throughout my pregnancy now focused on ensuring that this betrayal would not go unpunished. I trusted you, I said, looking first at David and then at Natalie. Both of you. While I was carrying our child, while I was sick and vulnerable, you were planning this behind my back. Natalie's defiant expression softened slightly, but she did not apologize or show genuine remorse. Rebecca, you don't understand how complicated this situation is. David and I never meant for this to happen, but sometimes feelings develop that you can't control. Her attempt to minimize the betrayal and present it as an unfortunate accident made my anger burn even hotter. This was not an impulsive mistake or a momentary lapse in judgment. They had been conducting a secret relationship for 2 months, making deliberate choices to deceive me, while accepting my gratitude for their support during my pregnancy. David stepped toward me, his hands raised in a gesture that might have been meant to be calming. Becca, I know this is shocking and I know you're hurt, but we need to figure out how to handle the situation in a way that's best for everyone, including the baby. His presumption that he could participate in decisions about handling the situation he had created was staggering. He spoke as if we were business partners discussing a minor setback rather than spouses whose marriage had been destroyed by his infidelity. The casual reference to the baby as a factor to be considered in their planning showed how completely he had compartmentalized his responsibilities as a husband and father. I realized in that moment that I was looking at strangers. The sister I had loved and trusted my entire life, and the husband I had chosen to build a future with, had been replaced by people I did not recognize. The David who attended prenatal appointments and discussed baby names had apparently been performing a role, while his real emotional investment was with my sister. The Natalie who brought me soup and helped expand my business had apparently been conducting market research for stealing my husband. The full scope of their deception began to reveal itself as I considered their behavior over the previous months. Natalie's frequent presence in our home, her enthusiasm about helping with my business, her interest in my pregnancy, and David's work schedule. She had not been supporting me during a difficult time. She had been studying my life and identifying opportunities to insert herself into my marriage. David's increased attention to my comfort and his apparent excitement about fatherhood now seemed like guilty overcompensation rather than genuine transformation. His thoughtful gestures and tender care had probably been motivated by his need to manage his own conscience, rather than authentic love for me and our child. "Get out," I said, my voice carrying a strength that surprised me. "Both of you, get out of this room right now." David started to protest, but something in my expression stopped him. He gathered his jacket from the back of his chair and moved toward the door, pausing to look back at me with what might have been regret or concern. Natalie was less willing to leave. "Rebecca, we really need to talk about this like adults. Running away from the situation isn't going to solve anything." Her condescending tone pushed me past the point of rational conversation. Adults don't betray their pregnant sisters. Adults don't steal their siblings' husbands. You want to talk like adults? Then you can explain to me how you justify what you've done while I was carrying my first child. Natalie's composure finally cracked slightly, and I saw a flash of what might have been shame or fear cross her face. But she recovered quickly, straightening her shoulders and walking toward the door with the same confident stride she had always used when leaving rooms where she had gotten her way. They left together, their coordination, even in this moment of crisis, speaking to the partnership they had developed at my expense. I remained alone in the conference room, surrounded by the evidence of a business meeting that now seemed to belong to a different lifetime. The vitamin bottle I had come to retrieve sat on the table where I had left it hours earlier. A reminder of the simple, trusting person I had been that morning. The silence of the empty room was profound, broken only by the sound of my own breathing and the distant hum of the building's ventilation system. I sat down in the chair David had vacated, still warm from his presence, and tried to process the transformation that had just occurred in my life. That morning I had been a happily married woman preparing to welcome her first child. Now I was a betrayed wife whose pregnancy had been used as cover for the destruction of her marriage by the two people she had trusted most. But as I sat in that quiet room, feeling the gentle movement of my child within me, something began to shift in my emotional response to the betrayal. The initial shock and pain were being joined by something harder and more focused. I was not going to be a passive victim of their selfishness. I was not going to allow their betrayal to define my future or my child's future. David and Natalie had made the mistake of underestimating me because of my pregnancy, assuming that my physical vulnerability would translate to emotional helplessness. They were about to learn that betraying a woman who is protecting her unborn child was the most dangerous miscalculation they could have made. I retrieved my vitamins from the table and walked out of the building with a sense of purpose that had not been there when I arrived. The woman who entered that conference room had been trusting and naive. The woman who left was someone entirely different. Someone who understood that she would need to become stronger and smarter than she had ever been before. The war they had started with their betrayal was just beginning, and they had no idea what they had awakened in me. The drive home from the downtown office building passed in a blur of automatic movements and disconnected thoughts. I navigated familiar streets while my mind struggled to process the impossible reality I had just witnessed. Every traffic light, every turn, every mundane detail of the journey felt surreal against the backdrop of my shattered understanding of my life. The vitamin bottle sat in my purse like evidence of a different existence, one where my greatest concern had been maintaining a consistent prenatal care routine, rather than confronting the systematic destruction of my marriage. Rebecca Martinez had always prided herself on being observant and intuitive about people's motivations and relationships. My success as a graphic designer depended partly on reading clients accurately and understanding the unspoken dynamics that influenced their decision-making processes. I had built a reputation for creating visual communications that captured not just what clients said they wanted, but what they actually needed to convey to their audiences. This skill had translated into personal relationships where I typically recognized warning signs and potential problems before they became serious issues. The complete failure of these abilities in detecting my husband's affair with my sister felt like a fundamental questioning of my judgment and perception. How could I have missed something so significant happening directly under my observation? How could two people I knew intimately have conducted a secret relationship for 2 months without triggering any suspicion or concern on my part? The questions multiplied as I considered every interaction, every conversation, every moment of apparent normalcy that had occurred while they were betraying my trust. My first instinct was to search for alternative explanations that might make the scene I had witnessed less devastating than it appeared. Perhaps David and Natalie had been planning a surprise for me related to the pregnancy or my business. Perhaps their intimate posture and intertwined hands had been innocent comfort during a difficult conversation about family matters. Perhaps my pregnancy hormones had distorted my perception and led me to misinterpret a perfectly innocent sibling and brother-in-law interaction. These rationalization attempts collapsed under the weight of what I had actually observed and heard. The body language between David and Natalie had been unmistakably romantic and intimate, displaying a comfort and familiarity that could only develop through ongoing physical and emotional connection. Their coordination in responding to my discovery, their lack of genuine surprise or confusion, and their immediate shift into damage control mode all confirmed that their relationship was established and deliberate rather than accidental or innocent. The timing of their affair added another layer of cruelty that made denial increasingly impossible to maintain. They had chosen to begin their relationship during the most challenging and vulnerable period of my pregnancy, when morning sickness had left me dependent on their support for basic daily activities. Natalie had been bringing me meals and helping manage my business correspondence during days when I was too nauseous to function normally. David had been taking on additional household responsibilities and attending prenatal appointments as my committed partner in preparing for parenthood. Their ability to provide this care and support while simultaneously developing their secret relationship revealed a level of compartmentalization and deception that suggested sophisticated planning rather than impulsive behavior. They had not simply succumbed to unexpected attraction or made poor decisions in moments of weakness. They had systematically constructed a framework for betrayal that allowed them to maintain their roles in my life while pursuing their desires at my expense. The house I returned to that evening felt like a museum of my former life, filled with artifacts from a relationship I had believed was real but now understood had been largely performative on David's part. The nursery we had painted together now seemed like a stage set designed to maintain the illusion of his commitment to our family. The home office he had created for my business now felt like a gesture motivated by guilt rather than love. Every thoughtful detail and romantic gesture from recent months required reevaluation in light of his secret emotional investment elsewhere. I walked through rooms that had witnessed countless conversations about our future as parents, our dreams for our child, and our plans for expanding our family and building a stable foundation for the next generation. The kitchen where we had discussed baby names over breakfast now seemed like a location where David had been performing the role of excited, expectant father, while his real emotional energy was focused on my sister. The living room where we had watched prenatal education videos now felt like a space where he had been going through motions required to maintain his cover story. The physical symptoms of shock began manifesting as the initial adrenaline of discovery faded into the sustained stress of processing betrayal. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I attempted to prepare a simple dinner, making basic tasks like opening cans or chopping vegetables nearly impossible. The nausea that had finally begun subsiding in my second trimester returned with renewed intensity, complicated by the emotional upheaval that made eating feel both necessary for my child's health and impossible given my psychological state. Sleep became elusive as my mind cycled through scenarios and explanations, searching for ways to minimize the damage or find paths forward that might preserve some version of the life I had been building. I would drift toward unconsciousness only to be jolted awake by the memory of David and Natalie's intertwined hands, or the casual way they had coordinated their response to being discovered. The bed that David and I had shared for 4 years now felt contaminated by the knowledge of his emotional infidelity, even though his physical presence was absent. David's absence that night was itself a form of communication about his priorities and commitments. Rather than returning home to attempt reconciliation or explanation, he had apparently chosen to spend the evening with Natalie, probably debriefing about my discovery and planning their next steps. His failure to even attempt to contact me suggested either that he viewed the marriage as effectively over, or that he was following Natalie's guidance about how to handle the situation. Either possibility indicated that I had become a secondary consideration in his decision-making process. The betrayal by Natalie carried different but equally painful implications for my understanding of family relationships and sibling loyalty. We had grown up as close confidants, sharing secrets and supporting each other through various challenges and transitions. She had been my maid of honor at my wedding to David, delivering a toast that praised our compatibility and expressed her excitement about gaining him as a brother-in-law. Her enthusiasm about my pregnancy had seemed genuine and touching, making her willingness to jeopardize my marriage during such a vulnerable time particularly shocking. The questions about Natalie's motivations were more complex than those surrounding David's behavior, because her betrayal involved both romantic attraction and sibling rivalry that might have deeper historical roots. Had she always been attracted to David and simply waited for an opportunity to pursue him? Had she developed feelings gradually over the months of increased contact during my pregnancy? Or had her actions been motivated by competition and jealousy rather than genuine romantic attachment? The marketing expertise that had helped expand my business now appeared in a more sinister light as I considered how Natalie might have approached seducing my husband with the same strategic thinking she applied to professional campaigns. She had certainly had ample opportunity to study David's preferences, interests, and vulnerabilities through her frequent presence in our home. She had observed our relationship dynamics and could have identified areas where he might be susceptible to alternative attention or validation. The timeline of their affair coinciding with my most difficult pregnancy symptoms suggested that Natalie had recognized my temporary weakness as an opportunity rather than a reason to provide additional support and protection. While I had been grateful for her presence during morning sickness episodes, she had apparently been using those occasions to develop intimacy with David and position herself as a more appealing alternative to a pregnant, frequently nauseous wife. My professional obligations provided both distraction and additional stress as I struggled to maintain focus on client projects while processing the emotional upheaval of the betrayal. The graphic design work that typically energized and fulfilled me now felt mechanical and pointless against the backdrop of my personal crisis. Clients who contacted me with routine questions or revision requests seemed to be calling from a different universe, where such concerns mattered and where people could be trusted to honor their commitments. The isolation I felt was compounded by the realization that my two primary sources of emotional support had been the very people who had betrayed me. David had been my partner in processing daily stresses and celebrating small victories, while Natalie had been my closest family confidant and advisor. Their defection left me without the usual resources for managing crisis situations, forcing me to develop new coping mechanisms and support systems during an already challenging time. The pregnancy added another layer of complexity to every aspect of processing the betrayal because my emotional and physical responses affected not just me but also the child I was carrying. The stress and trauma I was experiencing had potential implications for fetal development and my ability to maintain a healthy pregnancy. Every spike in anxiety or episode of crying carried the additional burden of concern about possible harm to my baby, creating a cycle where worry about the pregnancy's health increased my stress levels and potentially exacerbated the very problems I was trying to avoid. The practical implications of the betrayal began revealing themselves as I considered the immediate and long-term consequences for my living situation, financial security, and parenting arrangements. The house we shared belonged to both David and me, but the mortgage and utilities required both of our incomes to maintain comfortably. My graphic design business provided decent income, but might not be sufficient to cover all household expenses independently, particularly once childcare costs were added to the budget after the baby's arrival. The legal and financial complexities of separation or divorce during pregnancy presented additional challenges that required careful consideration and professional guidance. Property division, spousal support, child custody arrangements, and health insurance coverage all needed to be evaluated and potentially renegotiated while I was dealing with the emotional trauma of betrayal and the physical demands of carrying a child. The social implications of the affair's eventual public revelation added another dimension of concern as I considered how family, friends, and professional contacts would respond to the situation. David and I had been perceived as a stable, happy couple preparing enthusiastically for parenthood, while Natalie had been viewed as a supportive sister and devoted aunt-to-be. The discovery that this narrative had been largely fictional would inevitably generate gossip, speculation, and potential judgment about my ability to maintain my marriage during pregnancy. The rage that had begun building in the conference room continued intensifying as I fully processed the implications of their betrayal and the calculated nature of their deception. This was not righteous anger that would fade once I had expressed my feelings and received apologies. This was a sustained fury driven by the recognition that they had used my pregnancy and vulnerability as cover for systematically undermining everything I had worked to build in my marriage and family relationships. The protective instincts that had been growing stronger throughout my pregnancy now focused entirely on ensuring that their betrayal would not define my future or my child's future. I would not allow David and Natalie's selfishness to transform me into a victim who accepted whatever arrangements they found convenient for managing their guilt and continuing their relationship. I would not permit their poor choices to limit my options or compromise my ability to provide stability and security for the child I was carrying. The transformation that had begun in that downtown conference room continued developing as I spent sleepless hours considering my response options and available resources. The trusting, accommodating woman who had been grateful for their support was evolving into someone harder and more strategic, someone who understood that protecting her family would require sophisticated planning and decisive action. David and Natalie had awakened capabilities in me that had been dormant during the peaceful years of what I had believed was a secure marriage. By dawn, I had reached several important conclusions that would guide my response to their betrayal. I would not be seeking reconciliation or attempting to preserve a marriage that David had already destroyed through his choices. I would not be maintaining relationships with people who had used my pregnancy as an opportunity to pursue their selfish desires at my expense. And I would not be passive in ensuring that there were appropriate consequences for their actions and adequate protection for my child's future. The woman who had driven home from that office building in shock and denial was gone, replaced by someone who understood that survival and justice would require her to become stronger, smarter, and more determined than she had ever needed to be before. The morning after my confrontation with David and Natalie, I woke with a clarity that surprised me given the emotional turbulence of the previous day. The shock and denial that had dominated my initial response to their betrayal had transformed overnight into something more focused and purposeful. Where confusion and hurt had clouded my thinking, I now felt the emergence of analytical capabilities that reminded me why I had built a successful design business from nothing. The woman who had trusted blindly was gone, replaced by someone who understood that survival required investigation and strategic planning. My first priority was understanding exactly what I was dealing with in terms of the scope and duration of their deception. The casual way David and Natalie had handled being discovered suggested this was not an impulsive mistake or recent development, but rather an established relationship with its own routines, communication methods, and emotional infrastructure. Their coordination in responding to my presence indicated they had discussed the possibility of discovery and prepared strategies for managing such scenarios. The investigation began with systematic examination of the evidence that was readily available in my own home and daily environment. David's behavior patterns over recent months, which I had previously interpreted as increased attentiveness and consideration during my pregnancy, now required complete reevaluation through the lens of understanding his emotional investment elsewhere. The gifts, the romantic gestures, the apparent excitement about fatherhood, all needed to be analyzed for signs of guilt-driven overcompensation rather than authentic love and commitment. I started with David's personal belongings and spaces, searching for physical evidence of his relationship with Natalie. The home office where he managed his construction projects and personal correspondence became my first target for investigation. I had always respected his privacy and rarely examined his papers or computer files, but that courtesy no longer applied given the circumstances. My pregnancy had made me more dependent on David for certain household tasks, which meant I had legitimate reasons to access his workspace without arousing suspicion if he returned unexpectedly. The methodical search through David's desk drawers revealed several items that had not been there during previous casual encounters with his workspace. A receipt for an expensive restaurant where we had never dined together was dated 3 weeks earlier, during a period when David had claimed to be working late on a particularly challenging commercial project. The restaurant was located in the same downtown district where I had discovered them together, suggesting they had established regular meeting places for their relationship. More concerning was a credit card statement that showed multiple charges at locations and for purchases that were inconsistent with David's known activities and preferences. Jewelry stores, boutique clothing shops, and intimate restaurants appeared repeatedly over the past 2 months, corresponding precisely with the timeline they had admitted for their affair. The amounts were significant enough to suggest deliberate courtship and gift-giving rather than casual spending, indicating David had been investing substantial financial resources in pursuing my sister. The discovery of a second cell phone hidden in the back of David's desk drawer provided the breakthrough I needed to understand the full scope of their deception. The phone was an inexpensive prepaid device that I had never seen before, clearly purchased to enable communication that would not appear on his regular phone bill that I occasionally reviewed for household budgeting purposes. The existence of a secret communication device confirmed that their relationship involved sophisticated planning and operational security measures designed to prevent detection. The phone contained dozens of text message exchanges between David and Natalie that documented their emotional and physical relationship in explicit detail. The messages revealed not just the existence of their affair but also their attitudes toward me and their future plans that completely disregarded my well-being and my child's interests. Reading their communications was emotionally devastating but strategically necessary for understanding exactly what I was confronting. The earliest messages on the phone were dated exactly 10 weeks earlier, which meant they had lied about the duration of their relationship. Their affair had not begun 2 months ago, as they claimed, but rather had started during the first trimester of my pregnancy when my morning sickness had been at its most severe. They had initiated their relationship during the period when I was most physically vulnerable and dependent on their support, using my incapacitation as an opportunity rather than a reason to provide additional care and protection. The tone and content of their messages revealed the calculated nature of their betrayal. Rather than expressing guilt or concern about the pain they were causing me, their communications focused on logistics for meetings, expressions of excitement about their developing relationship, and planning for future scenarios that assumed my marriage to David would end. They discussed my pregnancy primarily as an inconvenience that complicated their ability to be together openly, rather than as a sacred responsibility that should have been protected from their selfish pursuits. Most disturbing were messages where they discussed strategies for managing my suspicions and maintaining their access to information about my emotional state and daily activities. Natalie had been reporting details from her visits to my home, including my comments about David's behavior, my concerns about the pregnancy, and my business activities. David had been sharing intimate details about our private conversations, our financial situation, and even our physical relationship during pregnancy. The messages revealed that they had been coordinate their performances during family dinners and joint activities, planning conversations and interactions to reinforce the impression of normal sibling and marital relationships while gathering intelligence about my state of mind and potential suspicions. They had essentially been conducting surveillance on me within my own home and family relationships, using my trust and openness against me to protect their secret relationship. The discovery of their communication records provided crucial insight into their future plans and intentions regarding our marriage and family situation. Rather than viewing their affair as a temporary indiscretion that would eventually end to preserve family relationships, they had been discussing scenarios for David leaving me and their building a life together. They had researched divorce procedures, discussed property division, and even speculated about custody arrangements for my unborn child in ways that treated my pregnancy as an obstacle to their happiness, rather than a precious life deserving protection. The financial investigation that followed revealed additional layers of deception that extended beyond emotional infidelity into potential fraud and theft. David had been using our joint credit accounts to finance his courtship of Natalie, which meant I had been unknowingly paying for the gifts, dinners, and experiences he used to seduce my sister. The amounts involved were substantial enough to impact our household budget and our savings for the baby's arrival, representing a direct theft of resources intended to provide security for our growing family. More seriously, David had been diverting money from our joint savings account into a separate account that I had not known existed. The transfers were carefully structured to avoid triggering automatic notifications and were disguised among legitimate household expenses and business transactions. Over the 10-week period of their relationship, he had moved nearly $8,000 into this secret account, effectively stealing money that we had both contributed to our family's financial security. The revelation that David had been systematically stealing money to finance his affair with my sister while I carried his child represented a level of betrayal that transcended emotional infidelity into criminal behavior. He had not simply fallen in love with another woman, he had deliberately undermined our family's financial stability to pursue his selfish desires. The money he had stolen represented security for our child's future, emergency funds for unexpected pregnancy complications, and resources we had both worked to accumulate through careful budgeting and sacrifice. The investigation into Natalie's role in the deception revealed that her betrayal extended beyond seducing my husband into actively undermining my business and professional relationships. The marketing expertise she had provided to help expand my graphic design client base had been accompanied by subtle sabotage, designed to create dependency on her continued involvement. She had been positioning herself as increasingly essential to my business success, while simultaneously working to destroy my marriage, creating a scenario where I would be both professionally and personally vulnerable when their relationship became public. The analysis of client communications and project timelines revealed that Natalie had been deliberately creating complications and inefficiencies in my business processes that required her intervention to resolve. Projects that should have been straightforward had been made unnecessarily complex through her suggestions and modifications, generating additional work and stress during my pregnancy while making her assistance appear invaluable. She had been manufacturing problems to create opportunities to demonstrate her worth while secretly planning to abandon me when her relationship with David reached its next phase. The discovery of her manipulation extended to recommendations she had made about potential new clients and business partnerships. Several opportunities she had encouraged me to pursue involved companies or individuals with questionable reputations or unrealistic expectations that would likely result in payment problems or professional conflicts. She had been subtly steering my business towards situations that would generate stress and potential failure, possibly to justify her eventual departure from my support system, when she chose to prioritize her relationship with David. The scope of their coordinated deception was staggering in its complexity and cruelty. They had not simply succumbed to unexpected attraction or made impulsive decisions that harmed my marriage. They had systematically constructed an elaborate framework for betrayal that included financial theft, business sabotage, emotional manipulation, and strategic planning for a future that completely disregarded my well-being and my child's interests. Their relationship was built on the foundation of my destruction, financed with money stolen from our family's security, and maintained through lies that had infected every aspect of my daily life. The emotional impact of uncovering the full scope of their betrayal was initially overwhelming, but it also provided crucial clarity about the nature of the people I was dealing with, and the level of response that would be necessary to protect my interests. These were not good people who had made poor choices. They were individuals who had demonstrated willingness to engage in systematic fraud, theft, and emotional abuse to satisfy their desires. Any response that assumed they retained normal ethical constraints or family loyalties would be inadequate to address the threat they posed to my future and my child's security. The protective instincts that had been growing stronger throughout my pregnancy now had specific targets and clear objectives. I needed to recover the money David had stolen from our accounts before he could transfer it beyond my reach. I needed to document their fraudulent activities in ways that would be useful for legal proceedings and financial recovery efforts. I needed to protect my business from further sabotage and rebuild client relationships that might have been damaged by Natalie's interference. Most importantly, I needed to ensure that David and Natalie understood there would be serious consequences for their systematic betrayal of my trust during the most vulnerable period of my life. They had chosen to use my pregnancy as cover for theft, fraud, and emotional abuse, demonstrating complete disregard for both my well-being and my unborn child's security. Their actions had revealed them to be people who posed ongoing threats to my family's safety and stability. The investigation phase had provided me with comprehensive understanding of their capabilities, methods, and intentions. The next phase would involve developing strategic responses that would protect my interests while ensuring appropriate consequences for their criminal behavior. The woman who had begun this investigation, seeking to understand simple questions about timing and motivation, had evolved into someone who understood she was dealing with sophisticated criminals who had targeted her family for systematic exploitation. The transformation from trusting wife to strategic investigator felt natural and necessary given the circumstances I was confronting. The analytical skills that had built my design business were proving equally effective at uncovering fraud and documentation evidence of criminal activity. The protective instincts that had been developing throughout my pregnancy were now focused on ensuring that David and Natalie would face appropriate consequences for their calculated betrayal of my family's trust and security. The comprehensive evidence I had gathered about David and Natalie's systematic betrayal provided clear direction for the capabilities I would need to develop in order to protect my family's interests and ensure appropriate consequences for their actions. The scope of their deception, which included financial fraud, business interference, and coordinated emotional manipulation, required responses that matched their sophistication and ruthlessness. I could no longer approach this situation as a hurt wife seeking reconciliation, or a betrayed sister hoping for family healing. I needed to transform myself into someone capable of strategic warfare against individuals who had demonstrated complete disregard for my well-being and my child's security. The first capability I needed to develop was comprehensive financial investigation and asset protection expertise. David's theft of nearly $8,000 from our joint accounts represented an immediate threat to our family's financial stability, but more concerning was the possibility that he had hidden additional assets or created financial obligations that could affect my future security. His willingness to systematically steal money to finance his affair suggested he might have engaged in other fraudulent activities that could expose me to legal liability or financial loss. I began by consulting with forensic accountants who specialized in marital asset investigation and hidden wealth recovery. The initial consultation with Patricia Kellerman, a certified fraud examiner who had built her practice around uncovering financial deception in divorce cases, provided crucial insight into the methods and resources available for comprehensive asset analysis. Her expertise revealed that David's theft of our savings was likely only the beginning of financial misconduct that would require professional investigation to fully document and recover. The forensic accounting process revealed the sophisticated nature of David's financial deception. Beyond the obvious theft of money from our joint accounts, he had been creating false business expenses in his construction management work that diverted company resources to personal use. The analysis of his employment records and expense reports showed a pattern of fraudulent claims for materials, labor, and equipment that had been used for personal projects or converted to cash for his affair-related expenses. More seriously, David had been using our joint credit and our shared excellent credit history to secure loans and credit lines that I had not authorized or known about. The comprehensive credit analysis revealed that he had obtained nearly $30,000 in credit card debt and a personal loan that used our house as collateral without my knowledge or consent. The documentation had been falsified to suggest I had participated in and approved these financial obligations, creating potential legal liability that could affect my ability to maintain our home during and after my pregnancy. The discovery of David's extensive financial fraud required immediate legal action to protect my interests and prevent additional damage. I retained Margaret Chen, an attorney who specialized in marital fraud and asset recovery, to begin the process of documenting the criminal activity and pursuing recovery through both civil litigation and criminal prosecution referrals. Her expertise provided crucial guidance about evidence preservation, legal procedure, and strategic timing that would maximize my ability to recover stolen assets while protecting my family's future financial security. The legal strategy developed with Margaret's guidance focused on several concurrent objectives that would address both immediate protection needs and long-term consequences for David and Natalie's criminal behavior. The immediate priority was freezing assets and credit accounts to prevent additional theft while documenting existing fraud for recovery purposes. The longer-term objectives included pursuing criminal prosecution for financial fraud, civil litigation for asset recovery and damages, and ensuring appropriate legal consequences that would prevent future victimization of my family. The evidence-gathering process required developing sophisticated documentation and analysis capabilities that would meet legal standards for criminal and civil proceedings. I learned to use financial analysis software that could track money flows, identify patterns of fraudulent activity, and create visual presentations that would effectively communicate complex financial crimes to judges, juries, and law enforcement agencies. The technical skills I acquired during this process represented a complete transformation from my previous comfortable reliance on David to manage most of our family's financial affairs. The investigation into Natalie's business interference required developing expertise in documenting professional sabotage and quantifying the damage to my graphic design practice. Her sophisticated manipulation of my client relationships and project management had been designed to create dependency while undermining my professional reputation and financial independence. The analysis of her interference required careful reconstruction of project timelines, communication records, and financial impacts that would support both civil litigation and professional accountability measures. The documentation process revealed that Natalie's sabotage of my business had been far more extensive and damaging than I had initially understood. Her recommendations about potential clients had resulted in my accepting several projects with companies that had histories of payment disputes and unrealistic expectations, generating months of unpaid work and professional stress during my pregnancy. Her modifications to my design proposals and client communications had created confusion and inefficiency that damaged my reputation with several long-term clients who had previously provided consistent referral business. More insidiously, Natalie had been systematically undermining my confidence and professional judgment through subtle criticism and suggestions that made me second-guess decisions that had previously come naturally. Her psychological manipulation had been designed to create emotional dependency on her validation and approval, while simultaneously weakening my ability to operate independently in my professional relationships. The reconstruction of this pattern required developing expertise in documenting emotional abuse and psychological manipulation that would be useful for legal proceedings and personal healing. The scope of Natalie's professional interference created opportunities for pursuing accountability measures through both legal action and industry reporting that could affect her career in marketing and advertising. Her use of her professional expertise to deliberately sabotage my business while maintaining the pretense of sisterly support represented violations of professional ethics codes and potentially actionable fraud that extended beyond personal betrayal into criminal business interference. The development of evidence presentation and communication capabilities became essential for ensuring that the complexity of David and Natalie's coordinated deception would be clearly understood by legal professionals, law enforcement agencies, and eventually by our broader family and social community. The scope and sophistication of their criminal activity required strategic communication that would counteract their inevitable attempts to minimize their behavior or present themselves as victims of relationship complications rather than perpetrators of systematic fraud and theft. I invested significant time and resources in learning to create comprehensive evidence presentations that would be persuasive and accessible to various audiences with different levels of expertise and interest in the technical details of financial crime. The presentation materials I developed included visual timelines, financial analysis charts, communication summaries, and damage assessments that could be customized for specific purposes while maintaining consistent messaging about the criminal nature of their behavior. The strategic communication planning process required anticipating and preparing responses to the various narratives that David and Natalie would likely attempt to promote in order to minimize their accountability and maintain their personal and professional reputations. Their inevitable claims that their behavior represented relationship complications rather than systematic criminal activity required comprehensive counter-arguments supported by documented evidence of their planning, coordination, and deliberate harm to my family's interests. The physical and emotional demands of developing these complex new capabilities while managing pregnancy and maintaining my business required systematic attention to health and wellness that would sustain my energy and focus through what would likely be months or years of legal proceedings and recovery efforts. The stress of uncovering extensive criminal activity while preparing for the birth of my first child created unique challenges that required professional support and careful resource management. I established relationships with healthcare providers who specialized in high-stress pregnancies and understood the unique challenges faced by women dealing with financial crime and marital dissolution during pregnancy. The medical support team I assembled provided both routine prenatal care and specialized monitoring for stress-related complications that could affect both my health and my child's development. Their expertise enabled me to maintain focus on legal and financial recovery efforts, while ensuring that my pregnancy remained healthy despite extraordinary circumstances. The psychological support resources I developed included counseling with therapists who specialized in betrayal trauma and financial abuse, providing professional guidance for processing the emotional impact of systematic deception while maintaining the mental clarity necessary for strategic decision-making. The therapeutic process helped me distinguish between appropriate emotional responses to betrayal and the analytical mindset required for effective legal and financial action. The network of professional support that I assembled during this capability-building phase represented a complete transformation from my previous comfortable reliance on David and Natalie for emotional and practical support. The forensic accountant, attorney, healthcare providers, and counseling professionals provided expertise and resources that enabled sophisticated responses to complex criminal activity while protecting my family's immediate and long-term interests. The development of personal capabilities in financial analysis, legal strategy, evidence presentation, and stress management represented growth that extended far beyond the specific requirements of addressing David and Natalie's betrayal. These skills created opportunities for professional development and personal empowerment that would serve my family's interests regardless of how the immediate crisis was resolved. The woman who had been comfortable depending on others for financial management and legal guidance had evolved into someone capable of sophisticated analysis and strategic planning that could protect her family from various future threats. The systematic approach to capability development provided confidence and clarity that replaced the confusion and vulnerability I had experienced immediately after discovering their affair. Each new skill I acquired and each professional relationship I established increased my ability to respond effectively to their criminal behavior, while reducing their power to cause additional harm through deception or intimidation. The transformation from victimized wife to strategic advocate felt both necessary and empowering given the circumstances I was confronting. The strategic planning process that emerged from this capability-building phase focused on comprehensive objectives that would address both immediate protection needs and long-term consequences for their systematic betrayal. The evidence I had gathered, the professional support I had assembled, and the personal skills I had developed created opportunities for responses that would ensure appropriate accountability while protecting my family's future security and well-being. The next phase of my response would involve implementing strategic actions that would leverage these newly developed capabilities to ensure that David and Natalie faced appropriate consequences for their criminal behavior, while establishing foundations for my family's future success and security. The woman who had begun this process, seeking to understand simple questions about infidelity, had evolved into someone capable of sophisticated legal and financial warfare against individuals who had targeted her family for systematic exploitation and abuse. The comprehensive financial investigation that I had initiated with forensic accountant Patricia Kellerman revealed a scope of criminal activity that extended far beyond the theft and fraud I had initially discovered. What I had believed was opportunistic misconduct by David and calculated interference by Natalie proved to be part of a sophisticated conspiracy that had been systematically targeting my family's assets, business relationships, and future security for nearly a year. The evidence that emerged from professional analysis of financial records, communication patterns, and business transactions demonstrated that their betrayal represented organized criminal activity rather than impulsive relationship complications. The timeline analysis conducted by Patricia's team revealed that David's financial crimes had begun almost immediately after I announced my pregnancy, suggesting that my vulnerable condition had triggered a coordinated plan to exploit our family's resources and relationships. The theft of money from our joint accounts represented only the most obvious component of a comprehensive asset-stripping operation that included credit fraud, business interference, and systematic preparation for abandoning me with maximum financial damage and minimal resources for supporting our child. The sophisticated nature of their planning became apparent through the analysis of communication records, financial transactions, and business relationships that revealed coordination between David and Natalie that extended into areas of our lives I had never suspected were vulnerable to interference. Their conspiracy had involved other individuals who provided expertise, resources, and cover for activities that neither of them could have accomplished independently. The network of conspirators included David's business associates, Natalie's professional contacts, and mutual acquaintances who had been recruited to participate in or provide support for their systematic exploitation of my family. The business investigation revealed that David had been using his position as a project manager for Morrison Construction Company to facilitate financial fraud that extended beyond personal theft into commercial crime that could have serious legal consequences for both him and potentially for me through our marital financial connections. His creation of false expense reports and fraudulent billing had been coordinated with subcontractors and suppliers who participated in schemes that diverted company resources and client payments into accounts controlled by David and his associates. The complexity of David's commercial fraud operations required expertise and coordination that suggested professional criminal activity rather than opportunistic workplace theft. The forensic analysis revealed systematic patterns of overbilling, false documentation, and coordinated financial manipulation that had generated hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent revenue over the past 18 months. The timing of this escalation coincided with my pregnancy, indicating that David had viewed my condition as an opportunity to accelerate criminal activities that would finance his future life with Natalie. Most disturbing was the discovery that David's fraud operations had been specifically designed to create financial liability and legal exposure for me, through our joint financial accounts and shared credit obligations. The structure of his criminal activities would inevitably result in investigations and legal consequences that would affect my ability to maintain our home, support our child, and continue operating my graphic design business. His planning had anticipated that I would bear the financial and legal consequences of his criminal behavior, while he and Natalie established their new life using stolen resources. The investigation into Natalie's role in the conspiracy revealed that her interference with my business had been coordinated with David's financial crimes to create a comprehensive attack on our family's income, assets, and future earning potential. Her marketing expertise had been employed to systematically undermine my professional relationships, while positioning herself to assume control of my client base and business infrastructure when their conspiracy reached its final phase. The analysis of Natalie's business interference revealed that she had been conducting what amounted to corporate espionage against my graphic design practice, stealing client information, design concepts, and business strategies that she intended to use in establishing her own competing firm. Her access to my business files, client communications, and financial records had enabled her to identify my most profitable relationships and develop strategies for transferring those clients to her own practice when she was ready to abandon the pretense of sisterly support. More seriously, Natalie had been actively sabotaging my relationships with potential clients and business partners through deliberate misinformation and professional interference that was designed to damage my reputation and limit my future earning potential. Her recommendations about specific clients and projects had been calculated to expose me to legal liability, payment disputes, and professional conflicts that would compromise my ability to maintain a successful independent practice during and after my pregnancy. The scope of Natalie's business crimes included the theft of intellectual property, client relationships, and proprietary business information that represented years of professional development and relationship building. Her systematic appropriation of my work product and business strategies constituted commercial theft that could be prosecuted under federal and state laws governing trade secrets and business fraud. The evidence of her activities provided grounds for both criminal prosecution and civil litigation that could result in significant financial recovery and professional consequences. The network analysis conducted by Patricia's investigative team revealed that David and Natalie's conspiracy involved multiple accomplices who had provided essential services and resources for their criminal activities. These included David's business associates who had participated in construction fraud, financial advisors who had helped hide assets and create fraudulent documentation, and Natalie's professional contacts who had assisted in appropriating my business relationships and client information. The involvement of third parties in their conspiracy created opportunities for both additional criminal charges and civil liability that significantly expanded the scope of potential consequences for their activities. The accomplices who had participated in financial fraud, business interference, and asset concealment could be held accountable through both criminal prosecution and civil litigation that would provide additional sources of financial recovery and ensure broader consequences for the network of individuals who had targeted my family. The investigation also revealed that David and Natalie had been preparing for the eventual discovery of their conspiracy by establishing alternative financial arrangements and business relationships that would enable them to continue their activities even if their initial crimes were exposed. They had created backup plans for asset concealment, business continuation, and legal defense that demonstrated sophisticated criminal planning rather than impulsive relationship complications. Their preparation for potential legal consequences included the consultation with attorneys who specialized in white-collar criminal defense, the establishment of legal defense funds, and the creation of alternative financial accounts that could not be easily traced or frozen through civil litigation. Their planning had anticipated that I would eventually discover their activities and had prepared strategies for minimizing their accountability while maximizing the damage to my financial security and business relationships. The discovery of their comprehensive planning for legal consequences provided crucial insight into their intentions and capabilities, while also creating opportunities for disrupting their preparatory activities through immediate legal action. The evidence of their anticipatory planning could be used to demonstrate the premeditated nature of their crimes, while also providing intelligence about assets and relationships that could be targeted for recovery and accountability measures. The analysis of their communication records revealed discussions about timeline for abandoning me and establishing their new life together that treated my pregnancy and childbirth as logistical obstacles rather than sacred responsibilities deserving protection and support. Their planning had included scenarios for David's departure from our marriage that would occur shortly after our child's birth, when I would be most vulnerable physically and emotionally while facing the demands of new motherhood. The coldness and calculation evident in their discussions about my pregnancy and their planned abandonment demonstrated complete disregard for both my well-being and our child's need for stable family relationships and financial security. Their conspiracy had been designed to inflict maximum damage during the period when I would be least capable of protecting myself or responding effectively to their crimes. The comprehensive scope of David and Natalie's conspiracy required legal and financial responses that matched their sophistication and ruthlessness. The evidence revealed systematic criminal activity that demanded prosecution through multiple legal channels, including federal financial crimes, state commercial fraud, and civil litigation for asset recovery and damages. Their conspiracy had created vulnerability to criminal charges that could result in significant prison sentences and financial penalties that would provide appropriate consequences for their systematic targeting of my family. The investigation also revealed that their conspiracy posed ongoing threats to my family's security that required immediate protective measures and long-term strategic responses. Their preparation for potential legal consequences suggested they would continue attempting to damage my interests and avoid accountability unless confronted with overwhelming evidence and decisive legal action that eliminated their ability to cause additional harm. The transformation that had begun with my discovery of their affair had evolved through investigation and capability building into comprehensive understanding of sophisticated criminal activity that required equally sophisticated responses. The woman who had initially sought to understand simple relationship complications had become someone capable of analyzing complex financial crimes and developing strategic responses that would ensure appropriate consequences while protecting her family's future security. The evidence I had assembled through professional investigation created opportunities for pursuing justice through multiple legal channels, while also providing the intelligence necessary for protecting my family from ongoing threats. The scope of their conspiracy had revealed the true nature of the people I was confronting, while also demonstrating that their criminal activities created vulnerabilities that could be exploited to ensure appropriate accountability and financial recovery. The next phase of my response would involve implementing comprehensive legal and financial strategies that would leverage the evidence of their extensive criminal conspiracy to ensure maximum consequences while protecting my child's future and rebuilding the security they had systematically destroyed through their coordinated betrayal of our family's trust. The comprehensive evidence of David and Natalie's criminal conspiracy created a decision point that would define not only my immediate response but the trajectory of my entire future and my child's security. The scope of their systematic targeting of my family's assets, business relationships, and financial stability demanded responses that matched their sophistication and ruthlessness. I could no longer approach this situation as a personal betrayal requiring private resolution, but rather as organized criminal activity that threatened the fundamental security of my family and required decisive legal action to prevent continued victimization. The weight of the decision I faced extended beyond personal considerations of forgiveness and reconciliation into matters of legal responsibility and parental duty. The evidence revealed that David and Natalie's crimes would continue generating consequences for my family regardless of how I chose to respond. Their financial fraud had created legal liability that would affect my creditworthiness and asset ownership whether or not I pursued prosecution. Their business interference had damaged professional relationships that would require active rehabilitation regardless of my personal feelings about their betrayal. Most critically, their systematic preparation for abandoning me after our child's birth, while maximizing financial damage, demonstrated ongoing threats to my family's security that could not be addressed through private negotiation or personal healing. Their planning had anticipated discovery of their activities and had prepared strategies for continuing their exploitation while avoiding accountability. The only protection available for my child's future lay in ensuring comprehensive legal consequences that would eliminate their ability to cause additional harm. The decision-making process required careful analysis of the various response options and their likely outcomes for both immediate security and long-term family stability. The evidence I had assembled provided multiple pathways for pursuing accountability through criminal prosecution, civil litigation, professional sanctions, and regulatory enforcement. Each option carried different requirements for evidence presentation, different timelines for resolution, and different potential outcomes in terms of financial recovery and legal consequences. The consultation with attorney Margaret Chen provided crucial guidance about the strategic considerations that would determine the effectiveness of various legal responses. Her expertise in marital fraud and asset recovery revealed that the strength of my evidence created opportunities for pursuing comprehensive accountability through coordinated legal action that would address both criminal behavior and civil liability. The sophistication of David and Natalie's crimes had created vulnerabilities that could be exploited to ensure maximum consequences while protecting my family's interests. The criminal prosecution pathway offered the most comprehensive consequences for their systematic fraud and theft, including potential prison sentences that would eliminate their ability to continue targeting my family. The federal financial crimes, state commercial fraud, and conspiracy charges supported by my evidence could result in significant incarceration periods and financial penalties that would provide both punishment and deterrence. However, criminal prosecution required transferring control of the process to government attorneys whose priorities might not align perfectly with my family's specific needs for financial recovery and ongoing protection. The civil litigation pathway provided greater control over the legal process and more direct focus on asset recovery and financial compensation for the damage they had caused. The evidence of systematic fraud, business interference, and conspiracy provided grounds for substantial monetary judgments that could recover stolen assets, while also providing punitive damages that would serve as consequences for their criminal behavior. Civil litigation would also enable broader discovery processes that could reveal additional assets and criminal activities while providing more flexible resolution options. The professional accountability pathway offered opportunities for ensuring career consequences that would limit their ability to victimize others through similar schemes. David's construction industry fraud could be reported to licensing authorities and professional organizations that could revoke his credentials and prevent future employment in positions requiring financial responsibility. Natalie's business fraud and professional ethics violations could be reported to marketing industry associations and regulatory bodies that could impose sanctions affecting her career advancement. The comprehensive response strategy that emerged from these consultations involved coordinating multiple legal pathways to ensure maximum accountability while protecting my family's immediate and long-term interests. The approach would begin with immediate asset protection measures to prevent additional theft, while simultaneously initiating criminal prosecution referrals and civil litigation that would address both punishment and financial recovery objectives. The decision to pursue comprehensive legal action represented a fundamental transformation in my relationship with David and Natalie, from family members who had made poor choices to criminal defendants whose activities posed ongoing threats to my child's security. This transformation required abandoning any remaining hope for reconciliation or family healing in favor of strategic responses that would ensure appropriate consequences while providing maximum protection for my family's future. The emotional process of accepting this transformation was challenging but necessary given the evidence of their systematic targeting of my family during the most vulnerable period of my pregnancy. Their coordination in exploiting my physical and emotional vulnerability demonstrated complete disregard for both my well-being and our child's need for stable family relationships. Their preparation for abandoning me after childbirth while maximizing financial damage revealed intentions that were fundamentally incompatible with any form of family relationship or mutual respect. The consultation with my healthcare team about the stress management requirements for pursuing complex legal action during the remainder of my pregnancy provided essential guidance about maintaining both my physical health and the emotional clarity necessary for effective strategic decision-making. The medical professionals emphasized that the systematic nature of David and Natalie's betrayal created ongoing stress factors that would continue affecting my pregnancy regardless of how I chose to respond, making decisive legal action potentially beneficial for reducing uncertainty and establishing protective boundaries. The psychological counseling I had been receiving provided crucial support for processing the emotional transformation from betrayed family member to strategic legal advocate. The therapeutic process helped distinguish between appropriate grief for lost relationships and the analytical mindset required for effective legal action against individuals who had targeted my family for systematic exploitation. The counseling support enabled me to maintain emotional stability while pursuing justice through complex legal processes that would likely extend through my child's early months. The financial planning required for pursuing comprehensive legal action involved careful analysis of resource allocation that would ensure adequate funding for legal fees while maintaining household security during pregnancy and early motherhood. The forensic accounting analysis had revealed that David's theft and fraud had damaged our family's financial position, but the potential recovery through civil litigation and criminal restitution could restore and potentially exceed our original financial security if pursued effectively. The strategic timing considerations for implementing legal action required balancing the urgency of asset protection with the practical demands of my advancing pregnancy and approaching childbirth. The legal team developed a phased approach that would initiate immediate protective measures while preparing comprehensive litigation strategies that could be implemented effectively regardless of timing considerations related to my pregnancy and recovery period. The evidence preservation and presentation requirements for multiple legal proceedings required systematic organization and professional documentation that would meet the standards of criminal courts, civil litigation, and regulatory enforcement proceedings. The comprehensive nature of the evidence I had assembled created opportunities for pursuing accountability through multiple channels simultaneously, but also required careful coordination to ensure that activities in one proceeding did not compromise effectiveness in others. The communication strategy for managing family and social relationships during legal proceedings required careful consideration of how public knowledge of David and Natalie's crimes would affect various personal and professional relationships. The evidence of their systematic fraud and conspiracy would inevitably become known through legal proceedings, requiring preparation for managing the social consequences of their criminal behavior, while maintaining focus on protecting my family's interests. The implementation of comprehensive legal action would also require establishing new support systems and professional relationships that could provide ongoing assistance during litigation processes, while maintaining the household stability necessary for welcoming my child into a secure environment. The network of legal professionals, forensic experts, and healthcare providers would need to coordinate effectively to ensure that legal activities supported, rather than compromised, my family's immediate needs. The decision to pursue comprehensive legal consequences represented acceptance of my evolution from trusting family member to strategic advocate for my child's security and future prosperity. The evidence of David and Natalie's systematic criminal targeting of my family had eliminated any possibility of maintaining normal relationships, while also creating opportunities for ensuring justice and protection through legal mechanisms designed specifically for addressing such criminal behavior. The woman who had discovered their affair several weeks earlier had been primarily concerned with understanding relationship dynamics and managing emotional pain. The person making this strategic decision understood that protecting my child's future required ensuring that criminal behavior faced appropriate legal consequences while recovering assets that had been stolen during my pregnancy. This transformation represented growth that would serve my family's interests regardless of how specific legal proceedings were ultimately resolved. The commitment to pursuing comprehensive legal action represented recognition that David and Natalie's systematic betrayal had created circumstances requiring sophisticated responses that matched their criminal sophistication. Their coordination in targeting my family during pregnancy demonstrated planning and ruthlessness that could only be addressed through legal consequences designed to eliminate their ability to cause additional harm, while providing appropriate punishment for their systematic exploitation of my family's trust and vulnerability. The point of no return had been reached not through emotional decision-making but through careful analysis of evidence that revealed criminal conspiracy requiring legal intervention to protect my child's fundamental security. The decision represented strategic thinking rather than vindictive response, focused on ensuring appropriate consequences while building foundations for my family's future success and protection from individuals who had demonstrated willingness to exploit vulnerability for personal gain. The next phase would involve implementing the comprehensive legal strategy that would leverage the extensive evidence of criminal activity to ensure maximum accountability while recovering assets and establishing protective measures that would serve my child's interests throughout their development into adulthood. The implementation of comprehensive legal action against David and Natalie's criminal conspiracy required assembling a network of professional allies and strategic partners whose expertise would enable sophisticated responses to their systematic fraud and theft. The complexity of their crimes, which spanned financial fraud, business interference, and organized conspiracy, demanded coordination among specialists in multiple legal disciplines, forensic analysis, and enforcement procedures. The transformation from individual victim to coordinator of professional legal action represented a fundamental evolution in my capabilities and strategic approach to protecting my family's interests. The legal team assembly process began with expanding beyond the initial consultation with attorney Margaret Chen to include specialists whose expertise addressed the various criminal and civil aspects of David and Natalie's activities. The comprehensive nature of their crimes required coordination among attorneys who specialized in federal financial crimes, state commercial fraud, marital asset recovery, business litigation, and professional accountability proceedings. Each legal specialty brought unique capabilities and procedural knowledge that would be essential for pursuing maximum accountability through multiple legal channels simultaneously. The federal crimes attorney, James Richardson, brought 20 years of experience prosecuting white-collar criminal conspiracies involving financial fraud, money laundering, and organized criminal enterprises. His expertise provided crucial insight into the federal prosecution process and the evidence standards required for securing criminal convictions that would result in significant prison sentences and financial penalties. His analysis of David's construction industry fraud revealed patterns that suggested potential RICO violations due to the organized nature of the conspiracy and the involvement of multiple accomplices across state lines. The state commercial fraud specialist, Linda Morrison, provided expertise in prosecuting business crimes that violated state laws governing professional licensing, commercial transactions, and trade secret theft. Her analysis of Natalie's systematic appropriation of my business relationships and proprietary information revealed violations of state business fraud statutes that carried both criminal penalties and civil liability. Her expertise would be crucial for ensuring that Natalie faced appropriate professional consequences that would limit her ability to continue targeting other businesses through similar schemes. The marital asset recovery attorney, Patricia Williams, specialized in complex divorce litigation involving hidden assets, fraudulent transfers, and financial misconduct by spouses during marriage dissolution proceedings. Her expertise provided strategic guidance for protecting my interests during divorce proceedings, while pursuing recovery of assets that David had stolen or hidden through his criminal activities. Her experience with sophisticated asset concealment schemes would be essential for ensuring comprehensive financial recovery, despite David's attempts to hide resources through complex financial arrangements. The business litigation attorney Michael Chen brought expertise in commercial disputes involving intellectual property theft, business interference, and professional sabotage. His analysis of Natalie's systematic undermining of my graphic design practice revealed multiple causes of action for business tort claims that could provide substantial monetary damages beyond the recovery of specific stolen assets. His expertise would be crucial for quantifying the business damage caused by Natalie's interference, while pursuing accountability measures that would deter similar professional misconduct. The coordination among these legal specialists required establishing communication protocols and strategic planning processes that would ensure their activities supported, rather than conflicted with each other. The comprehensive legal response strategy needed to coordinate timing, evidence sharing, and tactical decisions across multiple proceedings, while maintaining focus on the primary objectives of accountability, asset recovery, and family protection. The complexity of this coordination represented a significant management challenge that required developing project management capabilities beyond my previous experience. The forensic accounting support team expansion beyond Patricia Kellerman included specialists in digital forensics, asset tracing, and financial crime analysis, whose expertise would support the various legal proceedings with sophisticated evidence analysis and presentation. The digital forensics expert, Robert Taylor, brought capabilities for analyzing electronic communications, financial transactions, and digital evidence that would be crucial for documenting the coordination between David and Natalie and their various accomplices. The asset tracing specialist, Jennifer Martinez, provided expertise in identifying and recovering hidden assets through complex financial arrangements designed to avoid detection and legal action. Her analysis of David's financial activities revealed additional hidden accounts and assets that had not been discovered through initial investigation, significantly expanding the potential for financial recovery while also providing evidence of the sophisticated nature of his criminal planning. The financial crime analysis expert, Thomas Anderson, brought capabilities for analyzing complex financial schemes and presenting evidence in formats that would be effective for both criminal prosecution and civil litigation. His expertise in creating visual presentations and analytical summaries would be crucial for communicating the complexity of David and Natalie's crimes to judges, juries, and regulatory authorities who might not have extensive experience with sophisticated financial fraud. The healthcare support network expansion included specialists in high-risk pregnancy management, stress-related medical complications, and postpartum care during legal proceedings. The obstetrician specializing in high-stress pregnancies, Drive. Sarah Johnson provided medical oversight that would ensure my pregnancy remained healthy, despite the demands of coordinating complex legal action. Her expertise included monitoring for stress-related complications, while providing medical documentation that could support legal arguments about the harm caused by David and Natalie's systematic betrayal during my pregnancy. The mental health support team included therapists specializing in betrayal trauma, financial abuse, and the psychological challenges of pursuing legal action against family members. The trauma specialist, Dr. Elizabeth Davis, provided counseling support that helped maintain emotional stability while processing the ongoing revelations about the scope of David and Natalie's criminal activities. Her expertise was crucial for distinguishing between appropriate emotional responses to systematic betrayal and the analytical mindset required for effective legal strategy implementation. The business advisors and professional consultants who joined my support network provided expertise in protecting and rebuilding my graphic design practice while pursuing accountability for Natalie's professional interference. The business consultant, Maria Gonzalez, specialized in helping small businesses recover from systematic sabotage and competitive interference. Her expertise provided strategic guidance for rebuilding client relationships, protecting intellectual property, and implementing security measures that would prevent similar professional targeting in the future. The public relations consultant, David Kim, brought expertise in managing public communication during high-profile legal proceedings involving family disputes and criminal activity. His guidance was essential for controlling the narrative surrounding David and Natalie's crimes while protecting my professional reputation and ensuring that public knowledge of their activities supported, rather than compromised, my legal objectives and business recovery efforts. The financial planning advisor, Rebecca Thompson, provided expertise in managing resources during extended legal proceedings, while planning for long-term financial security as a single mother. Her analysis of the potential outcomes from various legal proceedings helped establish realistic expectations for financial recovery, while developing budgeting strategies that would sustain household expenses during litigation periods that could extend for several years. The coordination of these diverse professional specialists required establishing regular communication schedules, strategic planning sessions, and progress monitoring systems that would ensure all team members remained informed about developments in various proceedings while maintaining focus on coordinated objectives. The project management requirements for coordinating this level of professional activity represented capabilities I had never previously needed to develop, but which became essential for ensuring effective implementation of comprehensive legal action. The strategic planning process for coordinating multiple legal proceedings required careful attention to timing, evidence sharing, and tactical coordination that would maximize the effectiveness of each individual action while supporting the overall objectives of accountability and asset recovery. The legal team developed detailed timelines and coordination protocols that would ensure activities in one proceeding supported, rather than compromised, effectiveness in others. The evidence-sharing protocols established among the various legal and forensic specialists ensured that discoveries in one area of investigation would be immediately available to support other proceedings. The comprehensive nature of David and Natalie's criminal activities created opportunities for evidence developed in one legal context to provide crucial support for actions in other areas, but this required sophisticated coordination and communication systems. The financial resources required for supporting this level of professional legal action represented a significant investment in my family's future security and justice. The initial analysis suggested that the potential recovery from successful legal action would substantially exceed the costs of professional support, but the immediate financial requirements needed careful management to ensure adequate resources remained available for household expenses and pregnancy-related medical care. The timeline development for implementing various legal actions required balancing the urgency of asset protection with the practical demands of my advancing pregnancy and the procedural requirements of different legal forums. The coordinated strategy provided for immediate protective measures while preparing comprehensive litigation that could be implemented effectively regardless of timing considerations related to childbirth and early motherhood. The network of professional allies I assembled represented capabilities far beyond what any individual could achieve independently, creating opportunities for pursuing accountability and justice that matched the sophistication of David and Natalie's criminal conspiracy. The transformation from isolated victim to coordinator of comprehensive legal action demonstrated how systematic professional support could amplify individual capabilities while ensuring sophisticated responses to complex criminal activity. The establishment of this professional network represented recognition that protecting my family's interests required resources and expertise beyond my individual capabilities, while also demonstrating that systematic criminal activity created vulnerabilities that could be exploited through coordinated professional action. The allies I assembled brought collective expertise that would ensure David and Natalie faced appropriate consequences while providing maximum protection for my child's future security and prosperity. The coordinated implementation of legal action against David and Natalie began with immediate asset protection measures that would prevent additional theft while establishing the foundation for comprehensive accountability proceedings. The first phase of our strategy focused on emergency court orders that would freeze their access to marital assets, business accounts, and financial instruments they had been using to facilitate their systematic fraud. The success of these initial legal actions would determine whether subsequent proceedings could achieve maximum effectiveness in recovering stolen resources and ensuring appropriate consequences for their criminal conspiracy. The emergency asset protection petition filed by attorney Margaret Chen presented compelling evidence of David's systematic theft and fraudulent financial activities that posed immediate threats to my family's security and my unborn child's future welfare. The comprehensive documentation assembled through forensic accounting analysis provided irrefutable proof that David had been diverting marital assets to finance his affair while creating fraudulent financial obligations that would compromise my ability to maintain household stability during pregnancy and early motherhood. The family court judge, Honorable Catherine Morrison, reviewed the extensive evidence of financial fraud with obvious concern for both the sophistication of the criminal activity and the particularly egregious timing during my pregnancy. The documentation revealed patterns of theft and deception that clearly violated fiduciary duties owed to marital partners, while also demonstrating calculated exploitation of my vulnerable condition. The judge's response to the evidence suggested recognition that immediate protective measures were necessary to prevent continued financial abuse. The emergency order issued by Judge Morrison exceeded our initial requests by freezing all accounts accessible to David, while also requiring immediate disclosure of any additional assets or financial arrangements that had not been revealed through initial investigation. The comprehensive nature of the protection order reflected the court's understanding that David's demonstrated willingness to engage in sophisticated financial fraud required broad preventative measures to ensure adequate family protection. The immediate impact of the asset freeze on David's activities became apparent within hours of the court order implementation. The monitoring systems established through forensic accounting revealed multiple attempted transactions that were blocked by the emergency restrictions, confirming that David had been planning additional financial transfers that would have further compromised my family's security. The prevention of these transactions represented immediate financial protection while also providing evidence of ongoing criminal intent. The business protection component of our initial legal action focused on preventing Natalie from continuing her systematic appropriation of my graphic design client relationships and proprietary business information. The evidence of her coordinated business interference provided grounds for immediate injunctive relief that would prevent continued professional sabotage while preserving opportunities for business recovery and client relationship rehabilitation. The commercial litigation filing prepared by attorney Michael Chen presented comprehensive documentation of Natalie's systematic business interference, including her theft of client information, her deliberate creation of project complications, and her strategic undermining of professional relationships that had been developed over years of careful relationship building. The evidence revealed business tort violations that warranted both immediate protective relief and substantial monetary damages for the harm caused to my professional practice. The temporary restraining order obtained through emergency commercial litigation proceedings prohibited Natalie from contacting my clients, accessing my business information, or engaging in any activities that could continue disrupting my professional relationships. The comprehensive nature of the business protection order reflected the court's recognition that her systematic interference represented ongoing threats to my economic security, that required immediate prevention rather than remediation after additional damage occurred. The enforcement of business protection measures revealed the extent to which Natalie had been actively undermining my professional relationships through direct client contact and competitive interference. The monitoring systems established through the court order documented multiple attempts by Natalie to contact my clients with misleading information about my business availability and professional capabilities. These prohibited contacts provided additional evidence of her systematic business sabotage, while also confirming that immediate legal intervention had been necessary to prevent continued damage. The criminal prosecution referral component of our initial legal strategy involved presenting comprehensive evidence of David and Natalie's coordinated criminal activities to federal and state prosecutors who specialized in financial fraud and conspiracy cases. The documentation assembled through forensic investigation provided prosecutors with detailed evidence of systematic criminal activity that warranted serious consideration for formal charges and prosecution proceedings. The federal prosecutor assigned to evaluate the criminal evidence, Assistant United States Attorney Jennifer Martinez, expressed significant interest in pursuing charges related to David's construction industry fraud and the organized nature of the conspiracy that involved multiple accomplices across state jurisdictions. Infringers, agents. Her preliminary assessment suggested that the evidence supported potential RICO charges due to the systematic nature of the criminal enterprise and the coordination among multiple participants in fraudulent activities. The state prosecutor responsible for evaluating commercial fraud charges, District Attorney Thomas Anderson, indicated strong interest in pursuing criminal charges against both David and Natalie based on the comprehensive evidence of business fraud, theft, and conspiracy. His assessment suggested that their coordinated activities represented serious violations of state criminal laws that warranted prosecution to the full extent of legal authority. The professional accountability measures implemented through our comprehensive strategy involved reporting David and Natalie's criminal activities to licensing authorities, professional organizations, and regulatory bodies that could impose career consequences for their systematic fraud and professional misconduct. These professional sanctions would complement criminal prosecution and civil litigation by ensuring career consequences that would limit their ability to victimize others through similar schemes. The report filed with the State Construction Licensing Board provided detailed evidence of David's systematic fraud within the construction industry, including false billing, fraudulent expense claims, and coordination with subcontractors in schemes that violated professional licensing requirements. The evidence supported potential license revocation proceedings that would prevent David from continuing employment in positions requiring financial responsibility and professional trustworthiness. The complaint filed with the Marketing Industry Professional Association presented comprehensive evidence of Natalie's violations of professional ethics codes through her systematic business interference and client relationship appropriation. The evidence supported potential professional sanctions that could affect her career advancement and professional reputation within the marketing and advertising industries. The immediate results of these coordinated legal actions exceeded our initial expectations by generating swift responses from courts, prosecutors, and professional organizations that recognized the serious nature of David and Natalie's systematic criminal activities. The comprehensive evidence we had assembled provided credible foundations for multiple legal proceedings that would ensure accountability through various enforcement mechanisms while protecting my family's immediate and long-term interests. The financial impact of the initial legal victories provided immediate security improvements for my family, while also establishing foundations for substantial asset recovery through subsequent civil litigation. The emergency asset protection measures recovered immediate access to resources that David had been systematically stealing, while preventing additional theft that could have compromised my ability to maintain household stability during pregnancy and early motherhood. The business protection measures implemented through commercial litigation provided immediate relief from Natalie's systematic professional interference, while preserving opportunities for client relationship rehabilitation and business expansion. The prevention of continued business sabotage enabled focus on positive business development rather than defensive measures against ongoing professional attacks. The validation provided by swift judicial and prosecutorial responses to our evidence confirmed that the systematic nature of David and Natalie's criminal activities warranted serious legal consequences rather than private family resolution. The recognition by legal professionals that their coordinated criminal conspiracy represented serious violations of criminal and civil laws provided external validation of the strategic approach we had developed for ensuring accountability and family protection. The psychological impact of achieving immediate legal victories provided crucial confidence and motivation for continuing the comprehensive legal strategy through more complex phases that would require sustained effort over months or years. The success of initial legal actions demonstrated that sophisticated criminal activity could be effectively countered through coordinated professional legal response when supported by comprehensive evidence and strategic planning. The transformation that these initial victories represented extended beyond immediate tactical success to demonstrate fundamental changes in the power dynamics between my family and individuals who had targeted us for systematic exploitation. The shift from defensive vulnerability to strategic legal offensive provided both practical protection and psychological empowerment that would sustain continued efforts to ensure comprehensive accountability. The documentation of swift legal success provided compelling evidence that systematic criminal activity creates vulnerabilities that can be exploited through coordinated professional legal action when victims develop appropriate capabilities and strategic partnerships. The initial victories demonstrated that individual determination, combined with professional expertise, could achieve results that exceeded the capabilities of either individual effort or professional services operating independently. The momentum created by immediate legal success established foundations for pursuing maximum accountability through subsequent phases of criminal prosecution, civil litigation, and professional sanctions that would ensure comprehensive consequences for David and Natalie's systematic targeting of my family during pregnancy. The initial victories provided both practical advantages and strategic positioning that would support continued legal action designed to recover stolen assets while preventing future victimization. The recognition by courts, prosecutors, and professional organizations that David and Natalie's activities represented serious criminal behavior rather than relationship complications validated the strategic approach of treating their systematic betrayal as organized criminal activity, requiring comprehensive legal response. The initial victories confirmed that sophisticated criminal conspiracies could be effectively dismantled through coordinated legal action when supported by comprehensive evidence and professional expertise. These first significant victories in implementing comprehensive legal strategy against David and Natalie's criminal conspiracy demonstrated that systematic preparation and professional coordination could achieve rapid results in protecting family interests, while establishing foundations for sustained legal action that would ensure maximum accountability for their systematic betrayal during my pregnancy. The immediate success of emergency legal actions against David and Natalie's criminal conspiracy triggered a coordinated counterattack that revealed the sophisticated nature of their criminal enterprise and their extensive preparation for potential legal consequences. The asset freezes, business protection orders, and criminal prosecution referrals had eliminated their ability to continue systematic theft and professional interference, forcing them to implement defensive strategies they had developed in anticipation of discovery. Their response demonstrated both desperation and calculation, employing professional legal representation and public relations tactics designed to minimize their accountability while attempting to discredit my evidence and undermine my legal strategy. David's immediate response to the emergency court orders involved retaining Thomas Bradley, a defense attorney who specialized in white-collar criminal cases and marital fraud disputes. Bradley's reputation included defending corporate executives and wealthy individuals facing complex financial crime charges, suggesting that David had access to substantial resources for mounting sophisticated legal defense despite the asset freeze orders. The quality of legal representation David secured indicated either hidden assets that had not been discovered through forensic investigation or financial support from accomplices within his criminal network. The defensive strategy implemented by David's legal team focused on challenging the validity of the emergency court orders through procedural arguments designed to delay enforcement while creating opportunities for additional asset concealment. Their legal motions argued that the evidence of systematic fraud had been obtained improperly and that the emergency nature of the relief was not justified by actual threats to marital assets. These arguments represented standard defense tactics for wealthy defendants attempting to maintain access to resources while preparing more comprehensive defenses against criminal and civil charges. The sophistication of David's legal defense revealed coordination with financial advisors and asset protection specialists who had helped prepare contingency plans for potential legal action. The emergency court filings submitted by his attorney referenced complex financial arrangements and business structures that had not been identified through initial forensic investigation, suggesting that David's criminal activities extended beyond the theft and fraud we had already documented. The discovery of additional financial complexity created both challenges and opportunities for expanding the scope of legal action against his criminal enterprise. Natalie's defensive response involved retaining Jennifer Walsh, a prominent defense attorney who specialized in business litigation and professional misconduct cases. Walsh's expertise included defending marketing executives and business consultants facing charges related to commercial espionage and competitive interference, indicating that Natalie recognized the serious nature of the business fraud charges she faced. The coordination between David and Natalie in securing high-quality legal representation suggested ongoing communication and strategic planning, despite the court orders that had been designed to limit their ability to coordinate continued criminal activity. The legal strategy employed by Natalie's defense team focused on minimizing the scope of her business interference while attempting to characterize her activities as legitimate competitive business practices rather than systematic sabotage and professional misconduct. Their defense arguments claimed that her assistance with my graphic design business had been genuinely intended to help rather than undermine my professional relationships, and that any negative outcomes resulted from market conditions rather than deliberate interference. The coordination between David and Natalie's defense teams became apparent through their synchronized filing of legal motions that challenged fundamental aspects of the emergency legal actions while proposing alternative arrangements that would restore their access to financial resources and business activities. Their coordinated legal response demonstrated continued cooperation in defending against accountability measures, suggesting that the court orders had not eliminated their ability to communicate and coordinate strategic responses to legal action. The public relations component of their defensive strategy involved hiring Morrison Communications, a crisis management firm that specialized in reputation protection for high-profile individuals facing criminal charges and civil litigation. Their public relations campaign focused on portraying their situation as a private family matter that had been inappropriately escalated to legal action, while attempting to characterize my pursuit of accountability as vindictive behavior motivated by emotional rather than legitimate concerns about criminal activity. The media strategy implemented by their public relations team involved selective disclosure of information designed to generate sympathy for their situation while minimizing public understanding of the systematic nature of their criminal activities. Their communications emphasized the emotional stress of family breakdown during pregnancy while avoiding discussion of the financial fraud, business sabotage, and coordinated criminal conspiracy that had necessitated legal intervention. The carefully crafted messaging represented sophisticated reputation management designed to influence public opinion and potentially affect legal proceedings through indirect pressure. The intimidation tactics that emerged as part of their defensive strategy included attempts to discourage witnesses and accomplices from cooperating with criminal prosecution efforts through a combination of financial incentives and subtle threats about potential legal consequences for their own participation in fraudulent activities. The monitoring systems established through court orders documented communications between David's associates and potential witnesses that suggested coordinated efforts to obstruct justice and interfere with legal proceedings. The surveillance activities that were detected through security measures implemented by my legal team revealed that David and Natalie had hired private investigators to monitor my activities and gather intelligence about my legal strategy and evidence preparation. The professional surveillance operations included monitoring my communications, tracking my movements, and attempting to identify potential vulnerabilities in my legal case that could be exploited through their defense strategies. These activities represented serious violations of court orders and potentially criminal obstruction of justice. The financial warfare component of their counterattack involved challenging my access to marital assets through procedural arguments designed to create financial pressure that might force settlement negotiations favorable to their interests. Their legal motions requested court orders that would require me to bear the full cost of household expenses and pregnancy-related medical care without access to marital assets, creating economic stress that could compromise my ability to maintain comprehensive legal action against their criminal activities. The business interference that continued despite court orders involved indirect activities designed to undermine my professional relationships through third-party intermediaries who could not be directly connected to David and Natalie's prohibited conduct. The sophisticated nature of continued business sabotage suggested coordination with accomplices who had not been identified through initial investigation, expanding the scope of the criminal conspiracy while creating additional challenges for legal enforcement. The psychological warfare tactics that became apparent through their coordinated activities included attempts to exploit my pregnancy-related vulnerabilities through strategic timing of legal motions and public relations activities designed to maximize stress during critical periods of fetal development. Their calculated attempts to increase pregnancy-related health risks demonstrated complete disregard for my well-being and our child's safety, while revealing the truly predatory nature of individuals who would target a pregnant woman for systematic exploitation. The escalation of their defensive activities created opportunities for additional criminal charges related to obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and violation of court orders that could substantially increase the legal consequences they faced. The monitoring and documentation systems established by my legal team captured evidence of continued criminal activity that strengthened both criminal prosecution cases and civil litigation claims, while demonstrating their ongoing threats to my family's security. The strategic response developed by my legal team to counter their escalating opposition involved expanding the scope of legal action to address new criminal activities, while implementing additional protective measures that would prevent continued interference with legal proceedings. The coordination among federal prosecutors, state attorneys, and civil litigation counsel created comprehensive responses that addressed each component of their defensive strategy, while maintaining focus on achieving maximum accountability for their systematic criminal conspiracy. The additional evidence gathered through their own defensive activities provided crucial support for expanding criminal charges and civil claims beyond the initial scope of financial fraud and business interference. Their attempts to obstruct justice and intimidate witnesses created federal criminal liability that carried substantial prison sentences, while also providing grounds for enhanced civil damages based on continued criminal conduct during legal proceedings. The resilience required for maintaining comprehensive legal action while confronting sophisticated opposition from well-funded defendants with professional legal and public relations support represented significant personal growth and strategic capability development. The psychological strength needed to withstand intimidation tactics and public relations attacks while managing pregnancy and business responsibilities demonstrated extraordinary personal transformation that extended far beyond the immediate requirements of legal proceedings. The validation provided by the serious nature of their defensive response confirmed that the comprehensive legal strategy had identified and targeted sophisticated criminal activity that warranted maximum accountability measures. Their willingness to invest substantial resources in professional legal defense and reputation management demonstrated recognition that they face serious legal consequences that could significantly impact their personal and professional futures. The momentum created by their escalating opposition actually strengthened my legal position by providing additional evidence of ongoing criminal activity, while demonstrating to courts and prosecutors that these individuals posed continuing threats that required sustained legal intervention. Their defensive activities created opportunities for expanded legal action that would ensure more comprehensive accountability while providing greater protection for my family's long-term security. The transformation of their initial confident coordination into desperate defensive activities demonstrated that comprehensive legal action supported by professional expertise and systematic evidence could effectively dismantle sophisticated criminal conspiracies, even when defendants possessed substantial resources and professional legal representation. Their escalating opposition validated the strategic approach while creating opportunities for achieving even greater accountability than initially anticipated through the legal proceedings. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.